Thank you for coming on a busy afternoon. I know we kind of hit this wall. I feel we're 6 months into this whole situation of a pandemic, and I'd recently read that for those who work in global crisis situations, the 6-month mark is like clockwork, where you just hit a wall. And you say, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. But for those who've been in these situations before, they say, you know what, within 4, maybe 6 weeks, things will reset and you will get through this. You will get to the other side, and those things that you used to enjoy, or the feelings of a little bit of relaxation, those will come back. But I know right now we're feeling pretty weary. So today's a good opportunity just to kind of hit the pause button, talk about some good things that are coming your way as far as offerings for the education, internship, and career fair. And certainly we're here to help you. So why don't we start off with just a little bit of information about me. I am still kind of new to the Career Center. I was there for a whole 30 days before we had to go remote, so I didn't get a chance to hang out with y'all very much, but I do work a couple days a week in the center, and I'm thrilled to be there. I also happen to be the executive director of the Massachusetts Educational Recruiting Consortium. So if you're thinking about a career in education, this is a really good organization that you're going to want to have on your radar. Framingham State is a member of MERC. So there's usually an annual event every April where we facilitate networking and hiring for people looking for positions in education and related fields. Now, last year, we had to pull the event just because of the pandemic situation. This year, we should be having it. It might be virtual. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about today in terms of a virtual career fair format is going to apply to this. But definitely keep your eyes open for MERC. We have our own website, and certainly we will promote it through Framingham State Career Services too. I also want to mention I'm a licensed guidance counselor. So for those who have gone through the MTEL and all that process or have it coming up, I've been there. I know what it feels like. I'm with you. Don't give up. You can get through the whole process. But it does give me an appreciation of working certainly with students who want to work in education. So I just want to make sure I share that with you. I do work remote as we all do. Thursday, Friday, but there's fabulous people working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as well. So definitely take advantage of our services. Okay, so a little bit about career services. I think you're all familiar, but welcome back. We're here for you. I have been meeting with students in individual appointments, and a lot of them aren't aware of all the cool stuff that's coming up, like our pre-fair programs that you're in right now and the events themselves. So please spread the word and do continue to stay on top of whatever we're sending out, because we're really looking to connect you with folks so that you can build experiences, whether it's internships or you're looking for employment. Okay, so virtual appointments, you schedule those through Starfish. We do resume and cover letter reviews. We can do online self-assessment to discover your interests and skills, although I feel like I'm talking to a group that's already way beyond that at this point. Obviously, internship and job search guidance, interview prep, doing a mock interview, for example, and even grad school applications. Sometimes for education majors, that's a biggie. Getting ready for graduation, maybe thinking going on to grad school, we can help you with that too. Before I turn everything over to talk about the internship piece, I want to make sure everybody's on Handshake. So Handshake is our primary job search board. In meeting with a junior earlier today, he hadn't even heard of it. And so he was blown away that we even have this resource. If you are not on Handshake, you want to make sure that you get that taken care of as soon as possible. Our event, the Education Virtual Job and Internship Fair, it's on Handshake. That's where it's happening. It's going to be the busiest place to be if you're looking for jobs and internships. So we want to make sure that you're all set, make sure you register, make sure you go in, check the events, check the fairs, sign up for things. So as you know, the follow-up to this will be Friday, October 9th from 12:30 to 2. That'll be the actual event. just a little blurb here on why it's so amazing. It's free, it's easy to use, and look, this is where employers reach out to the office and say, I really want to get in touch with your students. I want to promote our opportunities. How do I do that? This is through Handshake. So you'll definitely want to stay on top of that. You're going to be able to upload your application documents through it too. So it couldn't be an easier process for you. And as far as registering, we have everything online, but just so you can see how easy it is, you literally will go in to the app, pick Framingham State, enter your student address, and then it's going to get you started, bringing you on board. Okay? All right. I would love to turn this over to Jill right now, who's going to talk about internship information. Our event isn't just a job fair, it's also for internships. So let's start with that.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Michelle. So my name is Jill Gardosic, and I'm the internship coordinator in the Career Services and Employer Relations Office. And I thought I would just kind of start out. This is typically where I get a lot of questions from students. They're trying to understand the different roles on campus as they relate to internships. So if you're thinking about completing an internship, our office is where you can turn to help you get prepared. Every one of the career counselors on staff, including myself, can assist you with, again, that resume critique or a cover letter critique. Maybe you want to practice interviewing and answering behavioral-based interview questions, your self-marketing pitch, how are you going to come up with references, professional references. We're there to help you prepare and guide you through the search process and to help give you some tips and techniques on different search strategies. Oftentimes, students are interested in earning academic credit for an internship experience, and that role actually lies outside of our office. So if you have questions regarding when you should be enrolling in an internship course, do you have room in your schedule based on the amount of gen eds you still need to complete, your major requirements, if you have free electives available, what that would look like. Those are questions that you need to ask your academic advisor. They're there to help you understand whether or not you meet the prerequisites for enrolling in a course. And then they have the ultimate decision-making ability in terms of whatever internship that you found, if it is appropriate, if it's meaningful for you to earn academic credit. If we could just head to the next slide, please.
Trying, Jill, sorry, for some reason I'm freezing. All right.
Excellent, thank you. And then, so I've defined what career services role is in the process and what your academic advisor may serve in the process. And then, let's get into a little bit of what the student's role is in the process. So maybe you've heard of internships, or you've heard upperclassmen or other students talking about completing internships. Where you really want to start is conducting some research. You want to be able to figure out what interests you in terms of a career after you complete your degree. And remember, you're going to be the one who's searching, applying, interviewing, and then ultimately accepting a position. And that's where we can support you in those endeavors. One thing I want to touch on briefly is you really want to make sure that if you accept a position, there's no turning back. You never want to, what it's called reneging on an offer. It really kind of paints you in a poor light. It paints the school in a poor light. It damages your relationship potentially with that employer for further opportunities down the road and networking. So you just want to make sure that when you do accept an internship position, that you honor your commitment and your word. You're going to complete the number of hours that employer is asking you to complete over the course of a semester or a certain amount of weeks. And you're going to fulfill those duties to the best of your ability. You're not going to, decline an offer because something better came along a few days later or a following week. And something else you want to take some time to really consider is really sit down and kind of review your budget, review your time constraints, and think about whether or not it makes sense for you to accept an unpaid internship. There's a variety of internships that are paid, some are not. So if you are pursuing an unpaid internship, you just want to make sure that you can afford to take it, knowing full well that it's an unpaid position given the amount of hours you may need to dedicate to that particular internship. Excellent. Thank you so much. So that being said, I'm just going to talk to you very briefly. I'm going to give you some highlights and an overview of 3 different internship programs that I work on. The first is through an excellent organization called the Washington Center. So students from any major are allowed to participate in this program if it's something that's of interest to you. What you would do is you actually spend an entire semester in Washington, D.C., and you earn 4 academic course credits here at Framingham State for that experience. Clearly, due to COVID, a lot of students may not be comfortable traveling to DC at this time. So luckily, the Washington Center has come up with a variety of alternatives. While you still, it's still possible to move down to DC for the semester if you decide to participate in this program. There's 2 additional alternatives. The first being you can have an entirely remote virtual experience, or at the current time, the Washington Center is allowing students who are accepted to defer for 1 semester in the event, hopefully, the situation improves and it's easier for you and more comfortable for you to move down in person. It's a 3-part program. You have an internship, which is very substantial. It takes up about 30 hours of your week, where you would go in Monday through Thursday to your internship location, roughly from 9 to 5, complete an internship. One night during the week for 3 hours, you're in an evening course, similar to when you're taking a course here on our campus. And then each Friday, you're in a variety of professional development activities, programs, group assignments with the other students that are in the program. So it's a really unique model. So we do, in fact, have an information session coming up on October 14th, and you can register for that information session. It's from 12:30 to 2:30 on Wednesday, October 14th. And a representative from the Washington Center is going to join me. They're going to provide very specific additional details, and then we'll be available to answer any questions that you may have on that program. And then we'll talk about the second program, which is the one I spend the bulk of my time doing on our campus. I administer the choice funding for our university. So you may have heard of this program before, hopefully on our campus. It's an incentive. So if students are in fact looking for internships where they want to earn academic credit, there's the possibility that there may be some funding in place for you. Funding is awarded to students on a first come, first served basis, and you must be enrolled in an internship class the semester you're completing your internship in order to earn this funding. And again, this is a program that's meant to help students that are in some of those unpaid positions that are located at either a nonprofit like the Boys and Girls Club, maybe Genesis Counseling Center, things of that nature, or a government office. So think about Framingham Police Department, Natick District Court, other government agencies, or an academic center or institute at the school. So our Merck Economic Research Center, the John Stalker Institute, things like that. If you were in one of those groupings, a nonprofit, a government office, or an academic center or institute, those are all employer sites that qualify for this funding. It's important to know, there's a lot of confusion from students, that this funding is a stipend. It is not equal, and it's not meant to replace your total hours worked. There are some students that may earn $500 a semester. There are other students that may earn $5,000 a semester. There's a calculation that's determined by financial aid that determines the amount each individual student gets. So as long as there's funding available, you just simply reach out to me and I can get you connected with the correct application forms and procedures for this program. I'd be happy to talk to anyone about it. And finally, there's just one more slide about a similar program known as Pathways funding. Pathways funding was developed for students that don't meet the strict choice requirements. This is another opportunity for you to potentially earn some funding for an internship that you're completing. There is one additional requirement for this funding. Because it is privately funded and not taxpayer funding, which funds the choice program, the donors, the very generous donors that are giving money to students for this program to run, they really feel it's imperative for students to have the best chance possible in terms of searching for internships and securing internships, to be partnering with the Career Services and Employer Relations Office. So students that earn this funding must complete 4 one-on-one career counseling appointments with members of our staff. It doesn't have to be the same individual. You can meet with all of us, whatever time works best for your schedule. But all of the funding and the paperwork that's necessary, the application, is run out of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement Office. And there's a wonderful woman, Emanuela Gibson. She goes by Manny Gibson on our campus. She administers those funds, and I've provided all of her contact information in this PowerPoint for you for that reason. So thank you so much for letting me take a few minutes just to kind of review some information that's important for all students about internships. And then we're going to turn it right back over to Michelle.
Thank you, Jill. All right. So what we're going to do now is talk about how to prepare for the virtual fair. And what I've done is tailor this to students looking for opportunities in education. If you haven't ever attended a virtual fair, don't worry. This is not going to be a hard process at all, but we are going to go over some key things to prepare. And I also want to highlight what you can do as you look at opportunities in education to put your best foot forward. So the first thing I want to go over, and can everybody see? Okay, perfect. I've already talked about Handshake a number of times. So here's my last push for getting into Handshake, making sure you're registered, and that you have identified the events that you'd like to participate in. Just because we're talking about the education virtual job and internship fair today does not mean you cannot attend all the other events. In fact, anybody can attend. Oh, looks like we have somebody to admit. Anybody can attend any of these events. So don't feel you have to weed yourself out. Today we're just going to talk about the education one, but please pay attention to all the other folks who are coming. Once you're registered, you're going to want to research who's coming. You would do this if it was an in-person event. So this isn't really any different in terms of how you're going to prepare. When you go into Handshake, you're actually going to get to see who's registered, who's going to be attending, and then you can start doing your research. You can find organizations that are a match for your interests, your values, your skills. Certainly having a resume ready is an important part of this. You would do this anyway. If it was an in-person event, you have time. You definitely have time before the event to reach out to us, have your resume reviewed. Maybe there's updates you want to make. Maybe you feel good about your resume, but you just want to have somebody take another look at it. That's exactly what we're here for. You can go into Starfish and schedule a virtual appointment. Crafting your elevator pitch and practicing interview responses That's definitely something you're going to want to add. Just being able to know how you want to introduce yourself, how you want to highlight your skills and what you're looking for with folks. You would be doing this in person. It's going to be the same thing in a virtual format. And then this is the part that's different. Because you're not going to be in person, you have to prepare your space for the actual event. So I'm going to go over all of those things, and I'm even going to touch upon thank you notes, cover letters, and portfolios as it pertains to your search. You don't have to have a thank you note, cover letter, or portfolio ready to attend our event, but you are going to want to be able to know what's ahead after you start getting your search going. And this is where, for some reason, I apologize, my computer will freeze on me. I'm not sure why it does this. Anyone ever been in a situation where you've had your presentation freeze? I don't know if this is a Zoom situation or what's going on.
Looks like there's an arrow on the bottom right. You could
I'll try that, but it's not.
Oh.
I'm literally frozen right now. Okay, maybe we just let it breathe and it'll go. I'll be much more nice. I'm not going to offend my computer. Okay, so in terms of researching your organization, when you look at that list, what I want you to think about is not just where you feel your skills can be used, but what also is going to be a good fit for you. When it comes to thinking about match and fit, there's a lot of things that go into consideration, like the size of the organization, the structure, where is it located? What's the weather like? What would your commute time be? What are the demographics and diversity of the student body and faculty and staff? What are their educational philosophy and objectives? It might be tough to find technology expectations, but that might be important to you. The facilities, projected growth or special programs. Sometimes this information can be highlighted on the district or organizational website. Other things, professional development opportunities, what type of parent and community engagement. These are some of the factors that folks working in education typically try to research, particularly the ones at the top. The structure, the size, where it's located, your commute time, and the demographics. Those tend to be really big ones in terms of thinking about researching your list. Now, as far as where to go, yes, we know about Handshake. That's one place where you can certainly look. School Spring, if you're familiar with School Spring, they are always being used in terms of the hiring process. Platform dedicated especially to that. Indeed.com, well, that's a job search aggregator. So you're going to have positions from every industry being posted, but it also will be a place where you can search for opportunities, whether it's internships or positions in education. City Year is an organization where a lot of students look in terms of pulling together a unique and special experience. And then there's others, the Education Cooperative, Teach for America. Boston Public Schools is on here because it's a big district, but any of the districts, you can go straight to the district website and look for opportunities. And then there's MERC. That's the annual event that I had mentioned that I work with each year. So there's no shortage of places to look, but I'm not going to lie. Start with Handshake for sure to see what we have posted. In terms of your resume, the whole point of your resume is to get an interview. Not to get an internship, not to get a job, it's to get an interview. Because what you want to do is be able to finally have that conversation to go into more detail about who you are and what you're looking to do, while the employer gets to talk about what they're looking for as well. Putting together your resume is important before this so that you have your materials ready to go and you can upload them. You can take advantage of opportunities. We have a career search guide on our website. I'm not going to provide you with a sample today. We'll talk about parts of your resume, but I want to point you to the career search guide for samples when it comes to resumes and cover letters. If I had to give you some quick tips just in terms of putting together a strong educator resume, I'm going to encourage you to limit it to 1 to 2 pages. If you have a lot of experience, and look, if you are getting into the classroom and you're accumulating all of your practicum experiences, it adds up. It can go on to 2 pages. But for the most part, limiting it to 1 is what you want to shoot for, and certainly use the 2 pages if you need to. Make sure this document is easy to read. Using a consistent font, keeping it around size 10 to 12, consistent margins all the way around, that's going to make it attractive to look at. I'm not going to lie, when I look at resumes, I tend to sort them. Which ones are the easiest to read? Which ones look nice and it's something that I can quickly scan to get the important information? And that's where I start. That's what most people do. So make it aesthetically pleasing. You're going to list your experiences in reverse chronological order. So that might be a little bit different than what you're used to. Most recent experiences are listed first in each section. You can use format features. So this is where you want to emphasize titles, organizations, and dates by maybe using bold or italics. The white space is important. Having white space on your resume goes back to what I just mentioned about having a good looking document. If it looks easy to read and organized, I'm going to be excited to look at it. I would urge you to avoid templates. They're kind of a pain. They're kind of a really big pain. When you want to go in and make a quick update on a template, it can be tough to do. If you just keep it easy with a simple Word doc, you are never going, although we were talking about Word docs earlier, so I take that back. Sometimes they can be frustrating. I think, Liv, you were talking about yours, but for the most part, keep it simple. Make it work for you. Using categories to organize content. I'm going to share with you what are sample categories you can use to organize the content on your resume. Bullet statements. Much easier to read a bullet than it is a paragraph. You're going to put your content, how you sell yourself, and talk about your highlights in bullets. You'll emphasize your transferable skills. And you're never, ever on your resume going to say responsible for or references upon request. We have action words that are going to do that much better for you. And you're going to avoid pronouns. So this is kind of like the quick list, the do's and the don'ts. I mentioned categories. So when you're looking at all your experiences on your resume, if you have never put one together or you're looking to update it, think about the sections that you can use to help organize the content. Clearly, name and contact information at the top is important, but let's say you have a portfolio. Let's say you have a LinkedIn. Get that information up there too, so the reader can quickly see other pieces of information to support and enhance your resume. Education section, that's always going to come after your contact section right now. Really important for hiring folks to know, where is this student in their studies? What are they studying? What are the key highlights in terms of their achievement? That helps them quickly gauge, again, where you are and where you may fit into their internship or hiring process. Areas of expertise, perhaps adding skills, your technology skills, your language skills. Think strategically. How do these skills add to your profile as a candidate? If you have built these skills and you know they're going to be important to your position, they should go on your resume. That's how you can differentiate yourself from other candidates. Licensure and certification. Whether you have it, whether it's pending, it goes on your resume as an educator or prospective educator. Important things for you to communicate. Clearly, teaching experience, education experience, coaching experience. Think of the variety of opportunities you've had where you're somehow in an educator-like role. It doesn't have to just be that you're a classroom teacher. What are experiences where you were working with students or working with adults, teaching? That could be coaching as well. When we get to professional experience, employment opportunities, things that allow you to show those transferable skills that add to your profile as an educator candidate, you would have a section for those. Activities and community service. Think about the things you're engaged in on and off campus. What are those opportunities where you've been able to build skills, working with people, your communication skills, your organizational skills, your listening skills. If there's any professional associations and membership, not something I see a lot undergrad, but certainly something to think about in the future on an educator resume. Certainly honors and awards. If you're in an honor society, if you've been on Dean's List, these point to your success and achievement as a student. Professional development, if you've had any of those opportunities, again, relevant to the role. Interest is kind of a tricky one. Some people will tell you, really don't want it on a resume. Others find it interesting. I think you can use that information if it helps share things that are, again, unique differentiators. So let's say you are somebody who trains for marathons, or you're a black belt in karate, or you have travel interests. Maybe there's things that you've done and you feel as an educator, you want to be able to use that in the classroom as well. Sometimes people want to coach, they want to be an advisor. I think there's ways that you can add it if it's going to enhance your resume, but it's not something you want to ditch other information to make room for. So take it on a case-by-case basis. How you add value. When we talk about those bullets, this is probably the most important part of the resume. It's the most interesting to read if it's done well. You want to think about information in many ways that you can quantify or qualify. You want to think of things where you accomplished something, you contributed to something, you performed something, and you can talk about those results or what you did. So in talking about education, here are some things to consider. When you're putting together your bullets for a position, in the role that you were in, did you increase student performance or parent community engagement over a specific period? How could you prove it? How could you talk about increasing student scores during an academic year, for example? Do you have a teaching specialty of expertise? How have these skills and knowledge base proven to be effective in the classroom? Have you brought in some technology enhancements? How about leadership positions? Have you done any coaching and advising in that role? How have the students benefited from your involvement? Did you get asked to work on any special projects or assignments or committees? That's definitely something interesting to read within somebody's list of accomplishments and results. Classroom management strategies, professional development activities, working with specific student populations. This is all really good stuff to include. So you don't want a job description. You really want to go beyond the job description and say, as my role as a classroom teacher, as a student teacher, here's the highlights. Here's the best stuff that I did in this role. And that's what you want to communicate. This paints a picture for the reader of what you're capable of. And now they can start picturing you in their environment, making similar results. So more about these bullets. Here's some sample ones for you. Created and implemented lessons and activities for 12 classes consisting of 250 students, 330 hours total. Now you could have a bullet that says you created and implemented lesson plans for 5th grade students. You could have that. But I would have to guess how many classes, how many students are in that class, how many hours. If you're putting me in a situation to guess, I might completely underestimate what you accomplished. So it's really on us, on our own resumes, to paint the picture so people can really appreciate what we did. Engaged middle school age students in Spanish conversations and games, 1 hour per week. That could be a tutor role. And sometimes people say, well, how much can you write about being in a tutor role? This could be a great bullet for something like that. Aided first-year students in acclimating to college life by developing activities to promote inclusion and community involvement. So it's not just about being an orientation leader, it's about specifically what did you do and what were the results of that? How did you enhance the organization through your work? And then you can see a few more. These are examples of really good bullets. They all start with an action word. None of them say responsible for. They're specific. And they have details. They have numbers. They quantify information wherever possible. If you're working in education, being able to talk about grades, ages, and hours, that can actually be pretty easy to do. So look for the opportunities to include this information. If it's not on your resume now, I guarantee you could take 15, 20 minutes, look at your resume, and give it a boost just by adding these types of details. Power action words. Think of words that are going to kind of give power to your resume. Advanced, coordinated. That sounds a little better than assisted. Helped, right? There's a little bit more power there. Initiated, mentored, motivated, executed. These things matter. They really do help in terms of boosting the appeal on your resume. So use them in a way that can give you that advantage. Elevator pitch. I don't want to get too much into this. Most people are pretty familiar with elevator pitch in terms of introducing themselves. But basically, you want to go into this virtual fair being able to know how you're going to answer the question, tell me a little bit about yourself, or just basic introduction of yourself. It's going to be a selling statement. So you want that opportunity to sell you. You want to cover what you're about and what you can contribute and are looking for. That's the direct communication somebody's looking for to connect with you in terms of their opportunities. What you don't want to do is go too far back. You want to start with where you are now. So think of where you are in your academics. Think of recent things that you've done. And when I say recent, it doesn't have to be 2020. Think over the past 2 years. What are the things that you've done that are relevant to what you're looking to do? And how can you concisely explain this? I'm going to show you a sample. I do think it's a little bit long, and it's my fault because I wrote it. But I just want you to hear for some key things in terms of what the elevator pitch can sound like. Hello, I'm Sophie, a student. I'm a senior at Framingham State University studying early childhood education. This past fall and spring, I was a student teacher at Maple Street Elementary School, where I worked with 25 kindergarten students in an inclusive classroom. When our school was forced to remote, I collaborated with our kindergarten teaching team to develop interactive lesson plans that paired with our technology. I've also worked part-time at our campus childhood center, where I taught art and science and managed our social media accounts. My goal is to bring my enthusiasm for technology into the K-2 classroom. I think this is an especially important goal given the pandemic and what we have learned about teaching remotely this year. It's a lot. It sounds like a lot that's in there. It's a lot easier, I think, when I say it. But if you were to go in and swap out and put your information in and sort of follow this template in terms of what goes into an elevator pitch, I guarantee it would be easy for you to come up with your selling statement. Who you are now, what are the most recent relevant things that you've done, and how can you sort of sprinkle in there what you're looking to do? What's the value you would be adding? You want your conversations to be relevant. So you might change the information just a little bit from person to person depending upon the position you're talking about. But definitely go into this virtual fair with something ready on how you're going to introduce yourself, and use something like this to organize your thoughts. Practice it. You need to hear yourself saying it aloud. And I guarantee if you give it some time, it's going to sound very fluid and natural when it comes to the actual fair and you get to have that moment to introduce yourself. Okay, interview prep. I'm going to speed up a little bit here because I need to give you opportunity to ask questions. So in terms of the interview prep, this is where, again, you have to be clear and concise in terms of how you pitch yourself. For education, subject areas, your personal philosophy about education, situations which you've worked with students and how you've handled them, or situations maybe you haven't handled yet, but how you would approach them. That's going to be the whole essence of a really good interview. So thinking about behavioral questions, situations you've been in, what was involved, what you did, what the result was, that STAR technique, that's how you shine in an interview. So in addition to getting your resume ready, thinking of your elevator pitch, think of your stories. What are the experiences you've had in education that you can relate, that speak to your strengths, that speak to the things that you're going to be able to deliver in that role that you know are relevant to the position? We have sample interview questions that are here. I think these would be great to share with you. And if you wanted to connect with us before interview, we do the mock interviews. Clearly, there's general interview questions people prepare for, but when you're an educator, There's particular ones that are going to be able to let you highlight your philosophy, how you define diversity, how you involve parents in your work. So while you're not necessarily going to need this for the virtual fair, you're going into a virtual fair to connect with people, this would be the next step in terms of how we can help you interviewing and make it specific to education. There's a lot of sample ones here. I don't want to take the time to go through all of them, but I do want you to know that's what we do, and that's how we can help you as far as those specific questions. One thing that I do think could come up, though, in the virtual event is that you have the opportunity to ask questions to the interviewer. So what I do think would be helpful, I think we should share the notes with you, and I really want you to look at questions that you can ask an interviewer in terms of learning more about them. Career fairs are opportunities to share information. So not only are they going to want information about you, but you're going to want to collect information from them to know how this could be a good match or fit for you. So things they like about their districts, what they find are strengths, what do they look for in an ideal candidate. Our employer showcase is going to talk more about that. For the virtual career fair, so this is where you're going to want to prepare. You're going to want to make sure your space is quiet and distraction free. Always pay attention to what's behind you. Are there dishes? Are there things? We all have them in our homes, but you're going to want to make sure when you set up for this, get a space where you don't have a lot of that going on behind you. Test your equipment. I could not have done a better job of showing you what not to do when you go in to this virtual fair. It was a master class in how not to be prepared. I thought I was ready, and even though I've done a million presentations, I wasn't. So don't take that for granted. Do a little test run, make sure you have everything ready. I like to keep a glass of water nearby. I have one right here. I probably spent more time worried about the water than my PowerPoint, but make sure you have both taken care of. Dress to impress. Somebody asked me earlier today, do I have to dress for this event? And I said, yes, of course you do. You want to look professional. You want to look polished. So make sure that what they're looking at is something that not only looks like you would wear to an actual event, but you're going to perform better. When you dress to perform, you do perform better. So you're going to want that professional communication in place along with how you're dressed. Maintain eye contact, try to minimize distractions. I don't do the best job with that. I talk with my hands. I might look up a lot, but when you're in that situation, keep that eye contact with that employer. And if you're in a one-on-one, it's a lot easier rather than a whole group panel. Make sure you're framed in the screen. So that's another piece. Just make sure, like a picture frame, that you're all set in your screen. They can see you, your full face. Engage with them. They expect you. If you are in a situation where there's multiple people, they're going to want you to introduce yourself. They're going to want you to participate. And this is a great way for you to show how you have those professional skills. And more than anything, don't leave your camera off. Make sure your camera's on. Just know going into these situations, it's not maybe situations you've had in the past where people had their cameras off and they could take notes. This one, you're performing. You need to have the camera on, and you need to be as if you're in that room together. Okay, real quick, post-career follow-up. I bet you didn't know, but you could probably just send an email thanking the person that you connected with. Doesn't have to be a big formal thank you note. It's a follow-up message that expresses your gratitude, and it kind of facilitates the relationship building process. So it's totally okay. Send an email within 24 hours. You're going to keep it professional communication. Dear Ms. Smith, just like you were, a handwritten note. Write about what you enjoyed about the conversation in the virtual fair. Maybe mention some things that were of interest to you. I think it's a great way, if you're going to be applying for an internship or position, let them know, and then thank them for their time. Not everybody does this. You should always take the opportunity to do this. It's definitely part of your professional skill set. Thank you notes. That's when a thank you note after an interview, what you're probably used to thinking about. Same thing. You can send the email. It's okay. Send it within 24 hours. You're definitely going to cover the same type of information. What did you learn from the conversation? Reiterate your interest. Express your gratitude. If you met with multiple people, big tip, send an email to each one of those folks. So sometimes you have to just track down contact info, but that's a really great way to personalize your thank you note. Lastly, and this is where I think we have too much information to share with you. Cover letters are something that you do not need for this virtual career fair, but they are going to be something very important as you apply for positions. We can help you work on this important marketing tool. It's a one-page document that enhances your resume. It introduces you. It sells you. It's very valuable. At the same time, your resume should be the priority in getting ready for this fair. There's best practices that come with doing your cover letter that we recommend. We certainly can help you with that. Most importantly, edit it. Have it looked at by one of us. If you're doing a cover letter for the first time, even though we have the resources in our handbook that you can look at, make an appointment. Once you go over best practices in terms of how to do this, it's easy to learn, and you'll have a good example moving forward. I have a lot of information in here in terms of the cover letters, but I just want to cover this last thing because this is unique to your college, and that's a teacher portfolio. I don't know if anyone has started to put one together, is thinking of putting one together, has even heard of one, but I highly recommend it. This is something, again, to support and enhance your resume. This is where you're going to have evidence of the work that you've done. There's electronic portfolios, and some people have a hard copy. Electronic portfolios, super easy to use, so I'm going to encourage you to check those out. These are examples of things that can go into your portfolio content. It's just like a nice package. You have a table of contents, you have your resume, you can include recommendation letters, you can include transcripts, educational philosophy, sample worksheets and games that you've put together, lesson plans, photos of your classroom. You can include that, final results of projects. There's a lot of interesting things you can put in here. And again, the whole goal is to be able to share with the organization, this is my best stuff, this is what I'm capable of, this is what I'm eager to bring into your setting. So definitely an important piece. You do not need it for the virtual fair, but it's something we can help you with as you go through the process. I have resources that are in here showing you how to set those up. We have 9 minutes, so I want to leave time if there's any questions.
Well, Michelle, I went out and got my jacket when you talked about the dressing. So, you know, I'm listening to you, girl.
It's a lot of information, but hopefully you know what to prioritize, and you can see that the virtual fair is going to be an amazing opportunity. At the same time, you can also see how we help you with the whole process. It's a journey. It's not just a one and done. You don't just make a resume and that's it. You create a resume. You work on preparing for events. You prepare for your interviews, the portfolios, the other things that come along with that, grad school applications. We can help with all of those things, but really don't want you to miss attending the virtual event because connecting with people is the single most important thing you can probably do right now.
Michelle, Kate has a question, I believe. She's raised her hand.
I just didn't want to cut you off.
No, cut me off. Cut me off. I'm trying to, I don't have the, see if I can get everybody.
So I just want to say, first of all, thank you for everyone involved for this presentation. It's really great. I'm a senior elementary education major, so I'm starting to like get into the job force, which is kind of terrifying yet equally exciting. I was just curious if the job fair that's on October 9th, is that for like educators who are looking to hire within the next academic year, like for 2021, or is it kind of like introduce and then we'll see if we have jobs later on?
Dawn, do you want to?
You're muted. Oh.
Yeah, these employer partners are hiring now and for the future. They're definitely, you know, looking for you. And you're in. Kate, you said you're staying on, which it's going to give you such great access to, you know, a superintendent and assistant superintendent, and you know it's going to give you a place to shine. So don't be, you know, get some questions. You know, get some questions ready because, you know, if we only have a few people, you know, Europe's, you know, intelligent questions and your interactions with them, you want to make yourself memorable when they see, you know, resumes or when someone, you know, recommends you to him, you know, some of these administrators. But then you go to the fair and you're going to I think we have 25 already. We have 20, we're full. So there's different school systems. Are you thinking about staying right here in Mass? Or are you open to opportunities across the country?
I'm looking more for Mass, around the Mass area, maybe Rhode Island. I'm a homebody, so definitely Mass.
That's the one thing, because, well, with Michelle's wonderful fairs, it's all around the country and the world. Usually Framingham State will stay right around here, but because it's virtual, we have a lot of different, like Florida, North Carolina, I think there's Arizona, California. I mean, we have from all over the country. So, but we also have the ones that are here as well.
Awesome, I appreciate it.
That's great. Yep. So they're going to be real people looking for real students. So go ahead. And I think, while we have 5 minutes left, you need to go in and kind of research. You go into the Handshake fair. So it says fairs. You go in there. That'll give you the list of all the school systems that are coming. And it also, when you click on that, you could click on and see some of their opportunities. But you know what? Sometimes they don't put everything in Handshake. So if you are interested, say Framingham Public Schools, but there's nothing posted for that. They don't have any jobs listed. Go to their website, go to School Spring, find it somewhere else and do your research. Because sometimes employers, they sign up for things, but they don't post their jobs, which we always recommend that they do. But I'd say probably 70% don't. So it's always like, you see, okay, they're coming to the fair. Let me go on their website and look and see what I can find there. Or, one of the School Springs or one of those companies.
Okay. Some of them could be like, oh, hey, we're looking for a 3rd grade teacher in September, just like an example.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool,
absolutely.
Cool. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And think of it, Kate, as you're planting seeds, you're relationship building. You're planting seeds and you're watering them. So when opportunities do arrive, you're not an unknown entity anymore. They're like, oh, Kate, yeah, you came to that virtual career fair that we had earlier this year. Great to see you again. That's putting yourself in terms of a competitive advantage.
That's
Olivia,
absolutely.
you had a question?
Yeah, so I'm only a freshman this year, so I don't even know if I'm too early on this presentation. I am wanting to go into the education career possibly in the future. I want to try to be a high school teacher. I don't know how I don't know how anything works yet. It's so like mind-boggling. I don't know if I'm too early or something.
First of all, we're all clapping for you for being here as a first-year student, because that's outstanding. You clearly came looking for information, right?
Yeah.
So what better way to set the stage for your future success than by starting now?
Could I interrupt for 1 minute, Michelle? I'm going to let Dawn welcome our first employer partner. Unmute yourself, Dawn. Dawn, you're muted. You're muted, Dawn. Dawn, you're.
I got it. I know I'm muted. I'm trying to get it undone. Thank you. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Hey, Dawn, how are you?
Good, thank you. Olivia was just saying she's a first-year student, and she wanted to know if she should be coming to things like that. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like, this is coming from the superintendent of Douglas School, so that he's telling us the truth. But we had Michelle, have you guys met, Paul, do you know everybody here?
I know Wendy. I don't know Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, I'm actually in Sutton right now, so I'm your neighbor.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Michelle comes to us. The poor thing started in February and we went remote in March, but she's a career counselor with us, and
Okay.
she comes with a lot of great experiences, and she runs the Merck Fair for the last 10 years.
Okay.
So you might have met there.
Okay.
And Jill and
Wendy.
I'll let the students can introduce themselves, and then we'll get into having you introduce yourself. Is that all right?
Sure.
Thank
Whatever you need.
I love it. You're so easy. That's great. Liv, would you like to go first and introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Olivia Renda. I'm a sophomore at Framingham State, and I'm currently studying English education, so secondary education with a concentration in English.
And where are you from, Liv?
I'm from Westminster, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And just to throw this out, she's a Mancuso Scholar. It's a very prestigious award, and it's an all 4-year award.
Oh, wow.
So she is amazing, and she's really, she has to do career development as part of getting this award. So she's a good friend of the office.
Okay.
And Olivia, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Olivia Heafy. I'm a first-year student at Framingham with a major in mathematics and a minor in secondary education. And yep, that's my hope, is to be a high school math teacher in the future.
And where are you from, Olivia?
Medway, Mass.
Okay. Right down the street, huh?
I'm a Medway girl. Medway High graduate of, I'm not even going to tell you, so.
Well, my mom graduated Medway '89.
Oh my God, yeah, that's great. Najee is here. I'm gonna let Kate introduce herself first, and then we'll start the proceedings.
Hi, can you hear me? My
Yes.
mic's been kind of weird. Okay, so my name is Kate Whitaker. I am a senior elementary education major, and I have a specialization in earth science and geography. So on top of getting my general licensure for grades 1 to 6, I will be additionally licensed in science 5 through 8 as well. So that's making me be able to teach science 1 through 6 if need be. Right now, I'm doing a couple things. Just wanted to give some background. I am an integrated STEM research intern at the Chris Walsh Center for Families and Educators of the Metro West. I have choice funding, like Jill was mentioning earlier. And I'm also an academic strategies tutor at CASA. So I've worked with a wide variety of ages with STEM curriculum.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
And where are you from, Kate?
I'm from Medway as well.
Oh my God.
You guys know each other?
Got the Medway
I do
going
know
on.
Olivia, yes.
That's awesome. Okay, so I think we'll start this. Just everybody, my name's Dawn Ross. I'm the director of the Career Services and Employer Relations Office for a couple more weeks. And I am proud and happy to announce our wonderful speakers today and our panelists. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We can start off with Paul. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and your current role, and could you give like a quick pathway to that current role? And we'll start off with those 2 questions.
Sure. So I'm Paul Vieira. I am the superintendent for the Douglas Public Schools, Central Mass, not too far from Framingham. This is my, I think, 100th day on the job. I started July 1. So this is my first year here. Prior to Douglas, I was the assistant superintendent in Ashland. So right next to your hometown of Medway and right next to Framingham, Framingham State. So I'm familiar with that area. So my path, I guess I'll start at the beginning. I went to college. My undergrad's from UMass Amherst, and I went to college to become an attorney. And quickly, yeah. And then probably my junior year, through a bunch of different things, I made the switch to education. I had a double major in political science and in Spanish. I grew up speaking Portuguese, so Spanish just came naturally and easy to me. And I just, one of those, as you guys are learning from college, your paths, you don't know how you get there from freshman year to senior year, but it just happens. So I ended up double majoring. And when I went into education, I had to make a decision whether or not I taught Spanish or I taught social studies. And to me, it wasn't about the content. It was about the art of teaching and being around kids. It didn't matter what I taught. So back in the early 90s, jobs weren't difficult to come by, but they weren't plentiful. And I had a better chance of becoming a Spanish teacher than I did becoming a social studies teacher. So I went where there were jobs. So I taught, I went back and I got my CAGs in administration, and I spent 6 years as a high school assistant principal, probably the best job I ever had. 10 years as a high school principal, 4 years as an assistant superintendent, and now 2.5 months, almost 3 months as a superintendent here in Douglas. So when I walked into the dorms of UMass, Olivia, the same year your mother did in 1989, because I was a graduate of the high school class of 89, I never thought I'd end up here. I thought I was going to be an attorney. And then when I started and made the decision my junior year to go into teaching, never did I think administration. And 27 years later, here I am in this seat and on this panel. So just hold on for the journey, because it's a journey. It's about a 40-year ride. Just hold on to it. There'll be bends, there'll be curves, there'll be dips, there'll be changes, and just, you got to roll with it. That's my introduction.
Thank you, Paul. Naji, could you tell the group a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got to your current role?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. Some of you all I have met in person. I'm also a fellow alum, class of 2018. So I guess a brief background about myself. So yes, I'm from Springfield, Mass. I went to FSU. I went to FSU for their dietetics program, and then was quickly met with the realities of science. Organic chemistry was not for me. So like Paul, it was definitely a pivot right after. And so, yeah, so I was a dietetics major, and then I went to the sociology field, just still a little uncertain of what I want to do. I'm like, let me stay in health sciences. And then as I got closer to graduation in terms of fulfilling my credits, I was just like, that's not it either. So I graduated sociology, minored in communications and biology. And then when I got out of school, my final year at FSU, I had a paid internship with Framingham Public Schools. I was their lead teacher for their before and after school program called Explorers, which is a great teacher pipeline program, if you will. And so I did that for a year. Then shortly after, Joseph then moved up from being the director of CRD to then being the assistant superintendent. And then I became his assistant. So I'm the executive assistant for the Office of Equity, Diversity, Community Development for Framingham Public Schools currently. I'm also enrolled into grad school as well. So I'm still going through the whole student situation. I'm in my second year at BU studying city planning. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. I've been in my role for 2 years now, and it's definitely been an amazing and very much interesting ride, considering some of the events that have transpired in the last 6 months as well. COVID, and then our social justice interactions, if you will, for lack of a better term, over the last 6 months as well. So that's kind of how I've gotten here. I can very much connect with Paul in terms of just like not going with the flow, but you just happen to pivot and you're just kind of like, well, I don't necessarily know how I got here, but I am here and I'm just kind of following what I like to do. So I would say more so just be kind of fluid in that regard. If teaching is really what you want to do, that's great. But it doesn't mean that you can't pursue teaching in different capacities as well. Teaching is, you can be a teacher in a variety of areas on a variety of levels. So it doesn't mean just working in a K-12 setting as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. That is a wonderful story. And, you know, as a fellow alum, we are so proud of all your accomplishments. And I'm going to be following you on LinkedIn for many years to come. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us how you got to where you're at right now?
Sure. Happy Thursday, everyone. I ate a little bit of a commute to the office today, so you can transport Joe today. So I started, I'm a Worcester State alum. I started as a computer science major. I'm not actually sure how I ended up in education. My senior year of college, I was asked to go to my former middle school and serve as a mentor for students. And it was that experience that I didn't start.
Joe, I hate to tell you this, but you're breaking up really bad.
Out of school time, with a heavy focus on social emotional learning. So it was from that work, I transitioned to Dyname, which is a college access or retention program. Now that program I worked at for about 5 years, became the director. It's one of the first national programs to develop a 5-year model. The entire program was funded through private dollars, And we had, for a 20-year span, we had an independent study. 75% of kids over 20 years graduated from our program and completed a 4-year degree within the first 4 years of their college. And 100% of our kids were first.
Uh-oh. Well,
capable of achieving their dreams, be it college, career, or beyond. What I also learned from that program is that there's too much good work and too many good strategies that are being hindered by a lack of dollars and investment. And so that program really, the success of that program I really struggled with the success of the program and the reality that we were hitting such a small percentage of students. So from there, I transitioned to the Worcester Education Collaborative, which is more like a think tank and a partner with the Worcester Public Schools. And while there, we wrote a grant called Promise Neighborhoods under the Obama administration. Became one of the first 20 national recognized sites under the Obama administration for Promise Neighborhoods. And that work I spent a few years doing. We worked on the development of innovation schools, the increased support for pre-K expansion. We worked on a community development model, parent organizing, a number of incredibly amazing different partnerships, all focused around the idea of developing holistic, resources and supports for students and meeting their actual needs and their families. And then from there, I did a little bit, took a break, did some acting, and then when I sort of regrouped myself, I went and joined public education. I developed the Community Resource Development Office. When I came in, it was an office of one me, and now it's an office of 15 full-time staff, over 200 part-time staff, and programs that run the course from summer programs to after school to before school to you name it. We just launched our adult learning program, I think about 1.5 years ago. So I'm really proud of that work. And when the superintendent came in and he sort of saw my vision and lens around family and community engagement, he had a vision in his own mind in terms of sort of the structure of the reorganization of the district that he wanted, and asked me if I would step into the role of assistant superintendent to manage the work of equity, diversity, community development. So it's fun. It's not sure to tell you that we have a lot on our plate, but it's pretty amazing work. And I think it's a sort of unique, it's a unique place that I get to play, a role I get to play in terms of public education.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I think I knew you when you were that one person office. I've seen it grow so wonderfully throughout the years. I'm going to go around and ask Paul, what types of positions for the students are you typically, do you see more of that you hire for? And do you see a change in the future? Some of these students, as you know, are first year or second year student. What kind of, are you seeing some trends maybe in a couple of years that maybe some students should think about? Paul,
yeah. In terms of what we're seeing for trends, it's really based on the need. We're seeing a lot of elementary positions being open, but it's just because there's more of them. When you get to the secondary level, especially in a smaller school district like I'm in here in Douglas, or when I was in Ashland, you have one AP English teacher. So we're seeing the need for staff. In terms of trends, I think in this COVID, or this hopefully very soon post-COVID world, just having kids and new teachers who have that flexibility of understanding the importance of technology, the importance of being open-minded and open to new things. I think the big push now, as we're seeing, and we should have seen for years, but now it's being highlighted, is that whole push towards student engagement and family and community engagement, and how can you keep kids engaged regardless if it's an online platform or inside the classroom. Out of the many drawbacks of COVID, and we know there are a lot, I think teachers now are opening their eyes, especially at the secondary level, to that, that chalk and talk and that lecture really isn't what kids need and how they're successful. So I think being open to show how can you engage kids, how do you connect with kids, how do you build those relationships, and how are you forming those pathways and those partnerships with the home are huge. I think the more that we as educators understand the ever-changing needs of kids and being able to connect with them and identify is huge. I've said this for years with teachers. You know, if in here and in your heart you're not ready to learn and you're not in a good space, it doesn't matter how awesome or dynamic of a teacher you are, you're just not going to make those connections and you're not going to get your content and your subject matter through. I think probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks and obstacles I've had to face, especially since my career has been at the secondary level and not so much at the elementary, is at the elementary level, you see teachers understanding the importance of connections and relationships with kids. At the secondary level, I teach biology. I went to school to teach biology. That touchy-feely stuff, that happens down in guidance. I think as soon as we start to see that shift now, as soon as you start seeing that shift that you can still teach bio, you can still get through your content, you can still get a kid ready for AP Physics, but it's okay to make a connection and do that. So I think that entire package deal, you know, when I used to hire people, and I don't know if I should be saying this to secondary kids at a college level, is I can teach someone how to be the content in English, the content in social studies, the content in science, maybe, but I can't teach you to like kids. I can't teach you to be nice. I can't teach you to connect. So for us and a lot of my colleagues and peers that we work with is that ability and that passion that you see to connect with kids. But you know, you can mold someone and mentor them to be a good U.S. history teacher, to be a good English 9 teacher. You can't teach someone to teach physics if you don't know science, or to teach Russian if you don't know the language. But in a lot of subject areas, you can mentor someone along, but you can't teach that kid piece.
Great. Absolutely. You know, that's so important, that piece. And you know, we talk about it all the time in our office about learning the soft skills.
Yeah.
And those can sometimes even more important than the hard skills in some places. Najee, what would you say? What do you, Framingham regional schools and Framingham High and Framingham, all the schools in Framingham, what do you see as the needs now and versus what you think people are going to need in 2 to 3 years?
So, I mean, Joe can also chime into this. I'll just
Joe,
say I'll just say from my angle.
In and out.
Yeah. So our department oversees teacher recruitment for the district as well. That was something that we took over from our Office of Teaching and Learning. And so in the beginning, right, it's definitely a feeling process in terms of like trying to figure out what the needs are in the district. And during my time here, the needs have somewhat grown as well. Joe's having connection issues. And so currently we have a district that's not, in terms of our teaching population, is not necessarily representative of the student population that we have in our district. Our district speaks over like 75 different languages. We have a variety of ethnicities in our district, and it's very diverse. And so that is one of our main goals, is a racially diverse teaching staff, but also linguistically as well. We have a lot of families. Spanish and Portuguese are some of the primary languages spoken in our district. And so we're looking to increase the population of teachers, but other staff, supporting staff as well, that speak another language. And then Joe, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, to Paul's point, that it's really hard to teach somebody how to connect with young people. So, like, there has to be that desire and that willingness, especially in this new age that we're in, where, you know, part of our work is diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion doesn't just mean simply, like, you know, we're hiring, you know, more people of color or more Black people. It also means that we're creating a space for difference of thought and opinion. And so people have to be comfortable enough or willing enough to become uncomfortable, especially when if they're coming into an environment that may be extremely new for them. You know, a lot of our teachers come from more, I would say, suburban communities where their experience, and a lot of times is limited in terms of, you know, growing up around people of color. And that's fine. I mean, but it requires work in terms of understanding the cultural implications around, like, how do you engage, support, build relationships with not only the students, but also the staff, knowing that many of our staff also, you know, come from extremely diverse backgrounds. And so part of where I think we're going as a district is, you know, we made a very strong statement in terms of being, you know, trying to develop an anti-racist district, meaning that we're challenging the notion of sort of diversity and inclusion to push back past the idea of saying, you know, we're going to tolerate people, and to say that, no, we're going to actively do the work that we have to do on a day-to-day basis to create an inclusive place, to challenge ourselves, to prioritize professional development, not just for our teachers, but for every staff member, from the custodian to the superintendent, because we have to understand the legacy of oppression and what that does in these spaces that make people feel uncomfortable. And in that conversation, there's a place for intersectionality, but all of that has to live into a place where people are willing to dig deep and engage. And if you actually think about the idea of what this work is all based around, it's all about social emotional learning, right? Critical, you know, analysis, and ability to self-advocate, you know, self-efficacy, all those things that are so important in terms of developing student social emotional, you know, learning needs are all critical in terms of being able to create an inclusive environment for them. So part of what we're looking for in terms of staff is people that are willing to not necessarily just coming to the district and adopt sort of the norm culture. We're looking for people who can challenge sort of the status quo, that are comfortable speaking up, that are comfortable, you know, working in different groups and trying different things, right? And honestly, being in a place where they are able to fail and learn and feel comfortable in knowing that, you know, failure isn't necessarily like, we're going to slap you across your hand and say like, oh, you did a horrible job. It's like, no, let's try this new strategy out. I'll give you an example. Our history department is looking at an entirely different way to teach U.S. History 101, which has implications naturally for 102. And it's a very different format and structure. And it's all based around the idea of like, how are we telling the story in terms of the lens in which, you know, we're talking about history? Is it just through the sort of Eurocentric narrative, or are we talking about diverse experiences as part of U.S. American history? Are we talking about the LGBTQ history? Are we talking about the immigrant experience? Are we talking about Black people? Are we talking about indigenous communities and their lens and experience with all of that? And it's like a rich and challenging and difficult conversation. And so for us to be able to engage in those conversations, we need people who can come in and be respectful, share their experiences and truths, but also be willing to learn and be committed to the idea that learning is an ongoing process, and you could be a really great teacher for 10 years, and then those strategies and the demographic you serve may shift or change, and that will require you to naturally shift or change with them.
I was going to say, kind of to piggyback on that, and I'll go back to Paul. What kind of co-curricular activities and experiential learning activities should students in educators be doing while in college, or, you know, to be prepared and for it to be value added when you're looking at their resume? What kind of co-curricular and experiential learning activities should students be doing?
I'm trying to. That's a good question. Schools want kids who are diverse and have a good background. I always liked, you know, one of the things I always did when I interviewed was I always tried to look at the other and find something, you know, my first questions, tell me a little bit about you, because when you start talking about yourself, it's always easy, it's comfortable, and it gets people in a safer space because it's easy to talk about yourself. If I noticed that they were still nervous, I always went to the other and said, hey, you like to hike, or you like to read a book, or you like to, you know, you did a service trip too. Tell me a little bit about that. So I always liked that in a resume because it gave me a default to be able to have people talk about themselves. Sometimes after you get to that, people were still nervous, and then, you know, there wasn't too much you could do about that. But you're also looking for candidates who can do some different things. And then when you're trying to build your team within a school, you remembered, hey, I interviewed Kate. I hired Kate. She, when she was in college, took a bunch of kids or did a bunch of trips over to Europe. I'd love to be able to do an international trip. Did you do that, Kate?
I wish. That sounds
Okay.
like so much fun.
You know, let me see how we can do that. Or, you know, Olivia did a lot of work with Best Buddies in college. I'd love to bring that program into the school. So sometimes just looking at seeing what they're doing gives you the opportunity to build off of them. You know, in looking at resumes, and I think I've met Joe. I think I met you at a career fair last year or 2 years ago at Hopkinton High School. Were you there recruiting?
Yes, I was.
Okay. I knew you looked familiar. So, so a lot of times when you're looking at resumes and things, especially at the elementary level or high school and social, you're getting 200-300 applications and you're getting bombarded with them. I think so. You're going through them. It's really tough on School Spring to make that application pop because of the format you need to do it. I think the biggest thing for candidates is the ability to network within the industry and within the education system and use those resources to your advantage. When you're getting, I think it was a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I did, it was right after Joe, right after the meeting at Hopkinton, myself and my colleague went to Framingham and we met with some seniors who were graduating. And we looked at one of the seniors, like, she's awesome, we should get her resume. So I asked her, I'm like, hey, we should have your resume. She said, actually, I met you at the career fair a couple of days ago. So I jotted down her name. I'm like, we need to make sure we interview her. When we looked at our pile, she was in the no pile when we paper screened her. But her personality just came out when we got to talk to her. So having that network is, and just making those connections is huge. So when you go in and you do your practicums, when you're doing your observations, make that connection with the teacher, make that connection if you can with the administrator, send them a follow-up email, however you can stay connected in schools, because that's how you make it through the paper screen when you're one of 250.
And kind of piggybacking on that, Joe, I'll ask you this. There's a new way to interview people now, and it's usually through you know, virtual means. How are students going to stand out virtually to you? What kinds of things that they need to be bringing to the table and telling you about in interviews?
So what we're looking for is experience. You know, if you're bilingual, it's amazing, but experience, I think, is crucial. And the more, sort of to Paul's point, like the more that you can showcase, like that you've done some work and that you can then tap those networks to help to put a good word in for you. I think it's helpful in terms of understanding sort of the quality of the work, right? I'll never forget a mentor of mine said, you know, people will give you a benefit of the doubt for the most part, but you really want somebody who can like vet or like really sort of like put their sort of name out there for you to showcase that your work stands out in a different way.
Yeah.
For us, the way that we've tried to do that has been really through our out-of-school time programs. So in terms of trying to develop our out-of-school time programs, the idea is around exactly that. You know, we've been working on standardizing our interview process so it's consistent, and we're trying to pull bias out, as you know, by having, you know, structured questions, structured time, you know, training for people who are participating on the hiring panels. There's still some work to do within that process, but the idea is to try to get to a place where people can showcase their skills over sort of like the assumptions that a hiring panel might have about whether they can or can't do the work. Because it happens all the time, right? Like we get 200, 300 applications. The first thing we're going to do is to look for the most qualified person. But part of what you can do in terms of trying to break that is to be already within the system, even if it's just in a role of like a substitute or somebody who's part-time. For us, we use the Explorer model. So about 5 years ago, we started a strategic plan that I developed for the CRD with the idea that we're going to build our teacher pipeline starting with our high school students and our college students. And so our Explorers program, which we negotiated last year into the contract, has an annual increase for every staff member, and people in our staff can start working as early as their junior year when they're eligible to work, and they can work as door attendees. And then from door attendees, you can go up to becoming an aide or an assistant. From there, you can go to becoming a lead teacher. From there, you can go to becoming a coach or assistant coordinator to a coordinator to a manager to an assistant manager. And all of these different positions come with different pay level scales. And then once you get to sort of the coordinator level, you're full-time with benefits. And we also have seasonal positions. Now, what that does is it allows us for the district to build essentially a minor league, if you will, like our junior varsity league, where we can coach, mentor, and cultivate young educators and help them to establish and build relationships. So like our out of school time staff, our Explorer staff, they'll get mentored by the, we'll hire a really good teacher to help them in terms of developing curriculum. Because our expectation is not that just kids are playing, we want 3 to 4 different activities in which they can engage in during their sort of like their structured lesson session. And it's all hands-on, it's all fun and engaging, but it's a way in which we're challenging our staff to develop some of those skill sets we want them to have as teachers, while also, focusing energy on the cultivation of relationships. And through that process, what we've seen is that we're seeing young people, come Framingham High School, go through Mass Bay or Framingham State, staying with us and completing their degree and then being hired or being promoted. I just lost one of my staff members to Keefe Tech. Not Keefe Tech, to McAuliffe. And I was super excited, and I was talking to the McAuliffe team, and I'm like, no, I'm excited because even though we cultivated her and wanted her to stay, I'm super excited that it worked. Like, our goal was to increase the pipeline and to get more people, young people, diverse people into this pipeline to work in education, and we see it happening. And that's the key, like the way in which you work now within your college years to establish those relationships and showcase your work, that's going to be the end, because it's much easier when you go to like a Frank Rothwell or Carrie Banach. These are some of our principals. It's much easier when they see your name on an application to say, I know this person, I've seen their work, I've seen them work with the kid. It might have been within a different role, but the recognition is there, and now you've got their attention. Now the question is, do they see potential within you to be able to do this work in a different role, expanded? But the experiences of being within the school is one of the best determinants for like being able to sort of break that, that ceiling, if you will.
Yeah, one thing that I always try to mentor students to do is, if they do have that part-time job at the mall or something like that, if they want to be a teacher, to do, to go into some of these after-school programs and get that experience. And how important is, we're just on to that, but the importance of having those types of things. And can you tell me other things on a resume that would make it maybe go into the yes pile?
Yeah. So when we're doing our paper screens and we're looking, we obviously understand that when you're looking at a resume of someone who just graduated from college, it's going to look a lot different than someone with 3 or 4 or 5 years experience. So we're cognizant of that, and we're mindful of that. So for you coming out of college, it's exactly as you said, Dawn, and Joe, you said it much more eloquently than I think I'm going to say at this point. It's great if you have your resume that you worked, that you did your student teaching here and you did your practicum there. But then when you look at that additional experience, if it's mowing lawns, working in McDonald's, being a waitress, okay, you understand that. But once you start seeing, wow, this person substitute taught, this person was an assistant coach here, this person did some tutoring at Framingham State, this person was a tour guide for new students. All those things that are in our world, in our space, you start looking at, you're like, okay, this person gets it. They get the importance of making the connections and being a people person and being in that space where you're interacting with others. So the more you can get involved, whether it's student substitute teaching, coaching, doing after school programs, Joe alluded to a lot of stuff that I didn't even know that you guys had over there in Framingham. Bob Tremblay's working you too hard, Joe. Tell him I told you that. Bob's a friend of mine. So Even just getting involved in that, no matter how small it is, it shows on your resume that you get it. And one thing that we say a lot, and I'm sure you guys say it at Framingham State and at Framingham Public Schools, you know when someone gets it. And all those little things you can do on your resume by getting involved in schools, and even when you student teach. Some of the best student teachers I ever had were the ones who didn't leave right at 2 o'clock, but they were there till 4 o'clock. They went to all the games. They were at the plays. They're like, hey, do you mind if we volunteer with Key Club? Do you mind if we chaperone a dance? I'm like, you're asking me if I mind if I get free labor? I go, absolutely. So tough to get chaperones for dances. But they got it. They knew how important it was to get invested. So the more you can do that, and that's the more things you can add on your resume. And those are more of the talking points you can have when you go in to an interview.
Okay, Najee, you were where these students were a few short years ago. Could you tell them really the keys to your success and how you took your experience and degree from Framingham State and made it work for you?
Yeah, so I think kind of going off of what Paul said as well. So I think the common denominator in there was the population that was being served. So when you talk about retail experience and some other jobs, right, more times than not, like the consumer is likely an adult. But what Paul went on to say is like, now you're talking about kids, right? Chaperoning, guidance, teaching, right? It's oftentimes it's with kids, and what does that management look like in terms of like behaviors potentially, right? And just showing that you can, you know, manage multiple kids at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so like for my experience, for example, which made it work for me when I got to the Explorers program, was that like I was working at a pool. So I was a lifeguard at a pool, worked my way up, and I was the manager at the only state pool in Springfield that was free. And so like my ability to connect with kids, you know, 1 through 18, if you will, was a little bit easier because of that experience. And so I think when you're talking about a resume situation, right, you want to be able to showcase that, okay, like I can work with kids and I can connect with them, but it also reflects that I can also build strong relationships with them as well. The technical skills are great. And, you know, that may get you through the door, but what is going to have you somewhat staying in that position or elevating is going to be based upon those relationships that you cultivate over time. So, and so I would say that that was kind of like conducive to some of my success that I've seen. And then coming out of Framingham State, right? Framingham State provided me with the opportunity to take on an internship, to collaborate with Framingham Public Schools so that it could be a paid internship. And getting that experience through the Explorers program. The Explorers program, to Joe's point, it's a great program. It's a quality program. There should be more pipeline programs like it. And so, yeah, those are just kind of some of my thoughts, kind of shortly put. But yeah, I would say that experience with kids, like if you feel like it's a little bit, your experience with kids right now was a little bit minimum, like that's fine. There's always tomorrow, there's always the opportunity to go ahead and look for those opportunities. But of course, do it a little bit sooner than later. So then you can build up that experience though, instead of being like, well, I have to submit my application in 2 months. And so I need 2 months of experience to get in. Try going after it right now, really. And I know it's very tough in this COVID world, but again, seek opportunities. Folks want to see that you're being proactive in your efforts in terms of looking for opportunities. If you're one that's just looking for opportunities to be given to you, unfortunately, the world isn't necessarily set up like that. Systems aren't necessarily set up like that. But if you actively go pursue these things and go build these relationships, again, to Paul's and Joe's point, oh, I've already seen your name before. Oh, someone mentioned your name already. And now I'm starting to make these connections. And then when I go to engage with you, it's a little bit easier for me to engage with you because I already have a name. Now I'm putting a face to it. Now I'm putting a voice to it. So, yeah.
Joe, you know, what did you see in Najee that made you want to hire him for your office? I know you're going to say all good things. I know I'm putting you right on the spot.
No, it's a great question. I mean, what I saw in Najee was tremendous energy and potential. You know, to Paul's point, you want somebody who's going to work and is committed to the work and wants to grow. I can remember, I mean, there's times where I'll be honest, sometimes I'll text Najee at Saturday at 10 p.m. I'll be like, hey, I'm working on this. And it's not a regular thing, but I'm like, you know, I've got something in my mind that I got to get done because if I don't get it done, it's going to drive me crazy. And within a minute or two, no matter what he's doing, he'll always respond and get me a file or a folder will give me an update on where a project is that's sort of like, that's been off my radar that I need to make sure it's getting done. So it's like that kind of energy is sort of what you're looking for. And, you know, and there's a balance, right? So like we have a pretty fun office, and we have a pretty unique, I think, style, because I also respect the fact that if I'm going to have that level of expertise, I've got to create a level of flexibility within my role to allow for there to be more of that sort of fun. You know, we're doing this, we're spending more time oftentimes with our you know, our staff and our team than we are with our families. So it's got to be fun work. And in that space, as long as I have somebody who can like manage like hard tasks, I've got too many things to be worried about, like what the, you know, the small details. So I need someone who is quick, efficient, can roll with the punches, like who doesn't get stressed out, who can deal with very intense situations and upset parents who are like threatening to go to the media, or, you know, threatening to put something on social media, or have already done that, and to be able to de-escalate them. And so like those are some of the skills that I've you know, I believe in terms of our conversations and our interview process that I saw within him. And those are some of the things that I've seen over the course of the last 2 years. Never forget that. Like, it's always great when it's going good, but inevitably something's going to go bad. And in that moment, you're either going to, you know, it's fight or flight. Like, you're going to rise up or you're not. And if you can't rise in those moments, if you're creating more work for me, then I'm not going to have the trust in you to give you the autonomy and the freedom that you are going to want to be successful within your own.
Now I'm done with my grilling. Now I'm gonna open it up to the students and the other staff that are on this call. Liv, do you have a question that you would like to ask, or one or two questions, or anything you'd like to know?
So actually this is more of like yeah, it is a question, but I have a resume right now and I'm a sophomore, and I was wondering if at all I'm having some formatting issues with it, but when it's done, could I send it to you just for like preliminary, like to look at, like look into it to see if it's actually a good resume? Obviously won't have any teaching like licensure on there yet, but
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. You have another question, Liv?
I'm
gonna put you on the spot. I can go back to you.
Yeah, and if you could put like your emails in the chat or something, just so I can have them down, that would be really great.
Smart move. Michelle, do you have anything that you'd like to ask?
I don't. I think definitely the conversation tonight is so timely, and I think it goes beyond information, it goes into wisdom. And that's the best sessions we can have with students, is when you're sharing wisdom with them about how they're going to be able to emerge professionally. Thank you.
Wendy, do you have a question for the panel?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I want to thank you I know it's a little premature for thank you, but the comments that you shared, the expertise that you shared, it's truly, I feel like the American Express commercial, it's priceless. Like, these students couldn't get this anywhere but from you. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart. You've inspired me. I think I want to become a teacher, and I'm not kidding. Like, I think I need to make a career change at age 50 plus. Somebody want to hire me? You guys, really.
We're looking for staff desperately right now. Yes.
Douglas isn't that far. But no, really, it was a tremendous sharing, and I'm delighted to have sat through this. I feel like I learned a ton, and it was helpful. So thank you.
I would just say, you know, not that I know, you know, just through my 4 years being in Ashland and working with Framingham, to the 3 students, listen to what they tell you at Framingham, because they know the path and they know how to get you there. So listen to them and trust them, and they won't steer you wrong. Probably the other piece of advice is, and I'm sure Joe and Najee will agree, is you got to know who you are and what you believe in and your values, and don't sell who you're not, because within 3 days on the job, am I hitting a nerve, Najee? Yeah. Don't sell who you're not, because within 3 days on the job, we'll know, and then it makes for a long year for everyone. Know who you are, be who you are. We would rather have that then you pretend you're someone you're not, or sell something that you can't actually produce, then find out a week into the job that you can't deliver. So be who you are.
Great advice, Paul. Jill, do you have a question? I know she's worked a lot with the choice program, paying for internships at all the schools. So it's a great program, and Jill coordinates that. So I know it's helped out a lot of schools. And I don't know off the top of my head, has Douglas been involved yet?
I don't have any questions around that, but I think it would be incredibly helpful for the students to hear if you're willing to share a little bit in terms of timeline for your industry, like when do postings tend to come out, when should students be looking and applying, what does the overall hiring process look like in terms of time to respond back to candidates. We get a lot of questions from our seniors that are gung-ho, they're excited, they're ready, to be applying for their first professional job after graduation. And then there's this big mystery of, I sent my resume and I don't know what's happening. So if either of you would feel comfortable sharing a little bit in terms of what hiring process tends to look like, I think that would be incredibly helpful for the students.
Oh. Joe, do you want to take that one to start?
Sure. So we're kind of trying to revamp ours because we're trying to post, we're trying to get better about posting positions earlier in the springtime, like around February, April, with anticipated openings. Part of what we're realizing is that we're losing out some strong candidates because for Framingham, our budget doesn't get approved through like the city. I think that's part of like the new city charter. It doesn't get approved until like May, June. So that's a really late time to start looking for staff. So what we're trying to do is post in February, March, maybe sooner, just anticipated openings. And if you sign up for any of those positions, what happens is you go into our automatic, our software system, which then will kick back to you other openings that are available within the district. What I would say is that, if you don't your first time get the position that you want, continue applying and also look at other positions. Because if you don't get a teaching position year one, it's not a loss. You could get an aide or assistant position. And by year two, likely something is going to open up because of principals particularly tend to focus in on people that can manage, all the things that we just talked about. So if there's any position that you see that you're interested in, always feel free to email me if it's within Framingham. And I'm always glad to reach out to the principal and ask them to give a special, some special attention to a couple extra minutes to just look over the resume. Particularly if, if I know your work, I'll ask them to see if they can at least allow you to do a mock class, because I think that is the place that we're trying to move as a district, where we're actually having teachers implement instruction, so that way we can see what skills they actually have in terms of managing a classroom and working with kids.
Yeah, yeah, Joe's spot on. That February, March, April is when districts know they have openings, whether retirements, and they post a lot for anticipated openings. But with budgets being tight in many communities, it's not until that town meeting and your budget's finalized in late May, early June, when you actually have the money that you could do it. So I might know that I need an English teacher who is retiring, and I'll know that right now. So I could technically post for the position, but not knowing how the year is going to play out, I might, because of the way my budget goes, not appoint an English teacher, raise my class sizes from 20 to 23 in English, but now use the funding I would have used for an English teacher for something else, or to fund a deficit in another area. So you got that February, right? But usually that April, May, June are big months. Another big month is April. A lot of things, weird things happen in schools in July and August. So you see a lot of movement in July and August. The timeline, I know that when I was a principal, I usually tried to get everything done in a week or two, but sometimes that week or two ended up rolling into 3 or 4 weeks, and it just, because of things, it just snowballed. I was bad with that. So the process usually takes, from when it's posted, there's 2 weeks it usually is posted. Then it usually takes a week for people to paper screen, and then things get things get moving. So from when the position closes to when it's hired is usually about a month-long process, depending on the position and what's going on. And I don't know how it is in Framingham, but I know in a lot of places I've been and talking to a lot of colleagues, you do that interview, but we're really not good at closing the jobs out to let people know that, you know, your resume was looked at, but we went in another direction. Or a lot of times when you go to School Spring, 200 people will apply. You'll interview 10, you'll hire one, but you won't officially close the job out, so people don't know that the job was closed. So I know it's frustrating from that end.
So I'll add on just two things I'm just thinking of from a student perspective, but also from the insight that I've gained while being here. So two things. So number one is just the virtual piece. So really try to capitalize on the virtual piece right now, because in some ways you're not necessarily having to go to place to like participate in something. So it's not really so much of a time conflict. It'll more so come back to effort. So look for Google like educational groups that are in the local area that host their own like career fairs, if you will. There's definitely a few out there. We participate in some. That's one route. And then the second thing, to Joe's point as well, like if you don't get in your first year, at least get your name in the system. So while I am at different career fairs, different universities, one of the things, like Olivia, you said you're only a sophomore. So something I would advise to someone in your position is to get your name in the system. So look to see if you can become an aide or a teacher's assistant of some sorts. So then that way your name is in the system, you build the relationships, you can do the networking piece, you have the opportunity to bounce around to different schools within the Framingham Public School District. You can potentially become a long-term sub. So then when the time comes for you to actually submit your application to actually be a teacher, it's just like, oh wait, she already worked in my school. Oh wait, I heard she knows so-and-so. It's literally, that's how it works. But I would, again, capitalize on the virtual piece. And then, of course, just try to get your name in the system by any means, really.
And I know that I did it with Wendy a couple of years ago. I know Framingham offers those mock interviews. Do the mock interviews if you can. Until you have to actually sit down and interview, it's a process that you need to go through. I interviewed here in Douglas, and one thing I did, I got this advice from, actually, oddly enough, I got this advice from Link Lynch 3, not Link Lynch 4, but Link Lynch's father gave me this advice. So what I did is you know how you have all your interview questions that you have through going through different classes, and teachers will give you potential interview questions that you have. I ended up I went to Quizlet and I wrote down the 150 potential interview questions that a superintendent could get asked. And as I was going for walks during COVID, I know you shouldn't do this, as I was driving, as I was doing different things, I would flip through those 150 questions just so I could practice them in my head. And when someone asked me a question, I was on. And you know, at a lot different applying for a teacher, but at this level, a lot of my interviews were 7, 8 o'clock at night after you had worked a full day. So you had to be on, you had to know your answers. So even just creating that Quizlet for when you do an interview and going through those it's not fun, I'll tell you that, but just going through those interview questions. So when someone says, you know, how do you deal with a discipline issue? What's your philosophy on education? You know, what are your views on co-curricular activities? How have you got involved? That just becomes, it's like muscle memory. It just comes to you like this, and your answers are quick, they're succinct, they're spot on, they're accurate. It shows that you know what you're doing. The other thing too, that's, again, I don't know how it would work in this COVID era, is with a lot of those job fairs, those are tricky because there's just a lot of people in them and it's tough to stand out. But even if you can, as a junior, just go and walk around for you to see what it's like, just to get down what people wear, what people look like, what schools are. It's amazing how many people don't know how to go dressed to an interview, or it's a soft skills, how to go dressed to an interview, how to go dressed for a job fair. So just even for you to see that is important. So,
Liv, I'll get you in a minute, but Kate.
Hi, first of all, I just wanted to thank everyone on this committee for like a really awesome presentation. I know as a senior, it kind of gives me a little bit ease of mind to kind of get introduced to school districts, so I appreciate that. I just had like a couple quick questions. So I know that in September, I'm going to be entering the workforce just as much as anybody else. And I know elementary is known for kind of like general education, but I've worked my 4 years to get specialization in STEM. Is that something that schools are actively looking for and seeking, is like education candidates who have specializations in science, technology, engineering, and math?
It can't hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we had King Elementary School, which initially the former superintendent, Dr. Scott, had established as being the district's first STEM school. And Dr. Tremblay has since made a commitment that the entire district should be, instead of having one program, that it really should be an opportunity for all students. So we have sort of a STEM district. So I know we have a STEM coordinator. I think that you'll find, especially particularly around STEM, given sort of the growth in the job market, that there's a heavy emphasis on STEAM, expanding STEM into art, and creating those opportunities for young kids and for students to explore potential.
Oops.
Yeah, and Kate, I think what you'll see in elementary ed, and I don't know if Najee and Joe have seen this, is the push in elementary, especially at the younger ages, really fall around ELA and in math. And many times, you'll see a weird hodgepodge of what social studies and science looks like because of the K-1-2 area. There's not a lot of kids. The MCAS test isn't in the K-1-2 space, and you see the push to get kids to read or write. And then you're also going to see the divide with staff, with your younger staff and your more veteran staff. And your veteran staff are really comfortable teaching your ELA and math, and they're not so comfortable teaching your science classes. So just even having someone who knows a little bit about the STEM, knows a little bit about science. So if a principal stands up and goes, I wish we could do more with science, but our staff's not comfortable with it, that's where your hand goes up and says, I'm an expert and I can help you. So, so it can't hurt.
Yeah, within my internship, I'm working again at the Chris Walsh Center. I'm working with creating STEM curriculum that is inclusive for formerly kind of marginalized communities. So I'm working with students with disabilities, students of color. If I was potentially like applying for a job and I was to submit a portfolio, would the work that I did at my internship be of interest? Like, should I include the lesson plans that I have created or kind of the YouTube channel that I'm starting, things like that? Would that be interesting and make me stand out?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Joe says yes as well.
I like the YouTube channel idea. And even if you came to an interview with, a portfolio, it's always not a bad idea. Just say, I have a portfolio if you want to look at it. And even though someone who's interviewing you might just flip through it for 30 seconds, it's one of those things that once you've done the job long enough and you flip through a portfolio, within 30 seconds, you know the caliber of the work that's in it. Even though it might not look like we're diving deep into it and we're not reading it, you know pretty quickly the caliber of the work in it.
Yeah, I'm thinking of in terms of like, you apply to a system or school that maybe it's not a true emphasis on STEM, right? I would think I would then like turn that inward and just be like, okay, all I need is an opportunity, because when I step into this space, like this is what I'm going to emphasize, or these are my specialties, these are my experiences, these are my skills, and this is how I'll be able to elevate my classroom. And now you got to have a long-term mentality in some ways, because now you're potentially creating opportunities for yourself and your students as well, right? What does it mean for me to be a lone teacher in that regard, but create partnerships outside of the classroom in terms of some community partners that there are in the STEM field? Or what is it for myself to have this experience, but then like the word starts to get out there about the great work that I'm doing as well? So even if the school doesn't value it, like, so what? You still have your classroom, and this is something how you elevate your classroom.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Olivia H. I'll get back. I promise I'll get back to you, Liv.
Hi. So being a freshman, I feel like, I don't know if I'm jumping too early into it, but I was like, how could I get assistance in writing a portfolio or writing a resume? Because I'm not really sure how to go about doing that.
Oh, you just make your first appointment on Starfish.
Hop on Starfish and check for me.
Okay.
Or Michelle as well. So Michelle is been working in this field for a long time as well. So that's great. And you know, I'm sure it's very impressive to our professionals here that a first-year student would come to a event like a virtual event like this. I'm very impressed.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Liv, your turn. Last but not least.
So a lot of you have talked about like the importance of getting your name in the system and becoming like a substitute. And I've actually been a substitute since my freshman year of college, but I've only been subbing in like a singular district. Is it more advantageous to go out into other districts to get your name into more systems, or focus on one district and show like your dedication and the amount of hours and days you'd be willing to put into that system?
Where are you from, Liv?
So I'm from Westminster, so it's the Ashburnham Westminster Regional School District. We just got a new superintendent too, Dr. Stewart.
Okay. I mean, there's pros and cons to each. So if you've been there for 4 years and you hustle and you work in 3 schools, again, the network is very small. So if you're looking to move back home and stay in that area geographically, and you've worked for 4 years in a school, and your principal or 2 principals picks up the phone to a neighboring community and say, hey, look at this kid's resume. They've been subbing for me for 4 years. Christmas vacation, February, April, long weekends. They hustle. They're awesome. That speaks volumes. And as long as your principal is somewhat connected, they can pick up the phone and make that call. Obviously, if you do that through 2 or 3 school districts, you know more people. But if you can really get to know a school district and how it works and build that relationship with that principal, that assistant principal, or that teacher, then when they make the call, there's a lot more depth to the to that call to the school district for that to get you an interview.
I think, like, to add on to what Paul said, so fully agree with Paul said, and then somewhat as a counter way of looking at it as well is just thinking about the demographic that district deals with as well, right? So I think, like, I'm a person, I like variety in general though, and trying to get a variety of experiences and tools. And so, like, if that is a more of an affluent area and I'm just working with that demographic of kids, then what will it be like when I have to encounter different cultures or deal with different races? Because on that front, I may not necessarily be prepared to deal with those with that particular culture or those groups of cultures. So how am I being culturally responsive? How am I being culturally aware when I'm engaging? And so, like, it's great to get your name out and build in one system, and of course hopefully get a phone call as well, but you also don't want to step into a different space where you haven't necessarily had that experience dealing with that demographic, and then it's almost like a train wreck waiting to happen in some regards though, right? Like, something may not work out the best, and at the simplest form it'll be relationships, and you may have challenges, you know, cultivating relationships with certain students, and then even families when you go even further, and then when you step out into the community as well, right? Like, you don't necessarily just want to be a teacher and that's all I am, but how can I also be a contribution to the community and our families and support our families as well? So if I were you, yeah, like, definitely, you know, build that time in that one district, but also participate in some other districts and get a feel for folks, because the experience is really what's going to, like, elevate you in comparison to maybe some other candidates that are like, well, I just stayed in this one district. We only dealt with certain types of students and families. So, yeah.
Thank you all so very, very much. This was the best one ever, as I say sometimes, but this is great. And I want to thank our professionals. I want to thank our students. I want to thank our staff. I want to thank Michelle for doing the hour-long presentation before you guys came on, but this is amazing and we so appreciate it. And thank you for letting our students have your emails and to get in further touch with you. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you again for helping us.
Our pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.